Welcome to Foundations in Therapeutic Modalities, Post- and Neo-Freudian Therapies. By the end of the session, you should be able to identify key contributions of analytical psychology, identify the fundamental concepts, discuss treatment in analytical psychology, and identify strengths and limitations. In this session, we'll be looking at the post-Freudian therapy analytical psychology, which was founded by Carl Jung. We're looking at fundamental concepts and implications for treatment. Carl Jung's theory of analytical psychology rests on his concept of the psyche, and his notion of the psyche is more complex than Freud's, although his theory did grow out of psychoanalysis. So according to Jung, psychic functioning involves three levels: the conscious mind, the collective unconscious, and the personal unconscious. So Jung did align with Freud in that he also believed that the conscious mind was only a small fraction of the psyche, and this includes the ego, persona, 2 attitudes, and 4 functions. So we'll examine those in a little more detail. So within the conscious mind, we begin with the ego, as it is considered to be the center. So the ego gives us our sense of the world and our reality, and has an influence over our interactions and transactions with our environment. And it also allows us to differentiate ourselves from others. The persona is the idealized side of ourselves that we allow the outside world to see. So it may change to adapt to different social situations, and it is affected by the group or individual we are with in a given moment. So in this sense, the persona can be inauthentic, as it doesn't always reflect our true inner thoughts and emotions, especially if those happen to be socially unacceptable. Now, extroversion and introversion are what Jung referred to as attitudes. So extroversion tends to be manifested in outgoing, talkative, energetic behavior, whereas introversion is manifested in more reserved and solitary behavior. The 4 functions, including thinking and its opposite feeling, sensation and its opposite intuition. So Jung believed that we tend to interact with the world through one of the 4 functions, termed our primary or superior function. Its opposite function is the least developed, and the inferior function is the most problematic. So, for example, is my primary or superior function, if it was thinking, for example, this would influence most of my decisions. My opposite, therefore, for thinking and feeling would probably be undeveloped, and I would have difficulty with emotions playing into decision making. Now, to a point, Freud and Jung were on the same page when it came to the nature of the unconscious. They both agreed that it was a large and very powerful part of the psyche and contained repressed material. So Jung's view of the unconscious, however, was more complex and potentially more positive, as he viewed it as a source of creativity, spiritual, and emotional growth. According to him, the unconscious mind has 2 levels, what's called the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. So the personal unconscious reflects the history of the individual, while the collective unconscious refers to accumulation of experience of human evolution. So this model does get fairly complex. And the collective unconscious includes many myths, images, and symbols, of which archetypes are particularly important examples. So Jung considered archetypes to be innate, and that they would be transmitted through cultures and generations. And he believed they appeared in our dreams and fantasies, often through symbols, and they influence how we think, how we feel, and how we behave throughout our lives. A central archetype is the self, which is the regulating center of personality. So it's responsible for integrating and balancing the needs and messages of the conscious, the personal, and collective unconscious. The anima is the psychological feminine component in a man, whereas the animus is the psychological component in a woman. Now, Jung considered these archetypes as influencing how we feel about and present the masculine and feminine sides of ourselves. So the shadow, however, is, as it suggests, it's our dark side that we don't wish to acknowledge, and Jung thought it originated in our ancestral archetypes, so manifesting in both our collective and our personal unconscious. So let's move on to take a look at the personal unconscious. The personal unconscious is unique to each individual, therefore personal. So Jung believed that it formed over the course of our lifetime and includes memories of thoughts, feelings, and experiences that we have forgotten or we have repressed. So images from our personal unconscious may be triggered by daily stimuli or activities. So, for example, I see a child playing with a dog, and it brings back a long forgotten image of myself as a young child when I had a dog. That sort of thing. So Jung believed that this kind of repressed image or memory generally emerges from the personal unconscious in incomplete, or it's disguised through dreams or symbols. Now, complexes are dynamic structures of personality within our personal unconscious. They have an impact on our daily lives. However, because they are located in the unconscious, they're generally out of our awareness. Well, how did Jung perceive human development? Well, he envisioned people's lives as divided into two periods. So the first half of life is concerned with finding our place and accomplishing the basic tasks of developing values and interests, finding a partner, and making career choices. During the second half of life, with our foundation in place, we progress toward what Jung called individuation. So this half is a lifelong process in which the self evolves, the persona is weakened, the shadow is better integrated and understood, and archetypes emerge to empower us. So overall, Jung's theory of human development it's optimistic, and it emphasizes growth that can continue throughout the lifespan. So perhaps we can see that Jung perceived that life consists of opposites or polarities, with their balance determining the psychological health and development of people. So a consequence of imbalance, for example, would be unrealistically idealizing love that can transform into hatred if that object of love fails to live up to the ideal image we have. So Jung attributed individual differences in personality into two dimensions. So typical ways individuals process internal and external stimuli, and the characteristic directions of their libidos. Jung's theory suggests there are four functions that determine how we process internal and external stimuli. Our dominance in one function determines our responses. So the first function is thinking, or reacting cognitively to seek understanding of stimuli in our environment. The feeling function is the opposite of thinking. So we react emotionally, focusing instead on pleasure and dislike, anger, etc. Sensation and function involves receiving and identifying physical stimuli through the senses and relaying them to the unconscious. So if sensation is our dominant function, we tend to look at facts and the substance of the stimulus and then look for concrete evidence of its meaning and value. So intuition is the opposite of sensation. So it relies on hunches about where the stimulus has come from, where it's going, and its possibilities. Jung believed that although each of us has a dominant or superior function that organizes our experiences and perceptions, having balance or access to all those functions enables us to operate more fully in a range of life situations. So as you might be discerning at this point, analytical psychotherapy is aimed at helping a person restore balance of all four functions, especially when one function remains overly one-sided or dominant. Jung's two attitudes are the second determinant of personality, and it is the libido's direction of movement. So his theory suggests that energy, or libido, moves primarily in one of two ways. So through extroversion or introversion. So extroversion is energy directed to the outside world. People in whom this energy dominates tend to be outgoing, they adapt well to social change, and they're energized by social interactions. Now, introversion is the exact opposite. So energy is focused inward. The tendency is to be introspective and recharge energy through time spent in solitude. So crowds of people may be exhausting for someone whose energy is dominated by introversion. A therapeutic treatment for Jungian analysts tends to be a lengthy process similar to Freud's classic psychoanalytic approach. The process is deep and it's intensive with a focus on understanding the personal and collective unconscious. The ultimate goal for treatment is reaching a resolution of inner conflicts, greater balance and integration in the person, individuation, growth in creativity and energy, and the expansion of spiritual feelings. So Jung did not seek to bring people to happiness per se, rather to enable them to cope with the inevitable pain and suffering of life and to find a balance between joy and sorrow. So we will now go a bit more into the stages of his model of treatment. Jungian treatment typically has four stages: catharsis and emotional cleansing, elucidation, education, and transformation. So the first stage, catharsis and emotional cleansing, is where intense emotions are released, and it offers a space where a client can understand the past without reliving it. So Jung viewed reliving the past traumas as undesirable, and I think most of us would agree he was correct about that. The second stage is elucidation, where clarification of symptoms, the anima animus, shadow, and the person's current life situation are clarified. So this is the stage where transference and countertransference are explored and analyzed. And Jung believed that both transference and countertransference can actually inform and guide treatment. The third stage, education, can help remedy gaps in development that have resulted in maladjustment or imbalances. So during this stage, the clinician is supportive and encouraging, helping support the client to take risks to improve their life. And this also marks a stage in Jungian's theories wherein a client can sometimes stop treatment. Now, if they get to the fourth stage, this is when the client has achieved an in-depth access to the collective unconscious and archetypes. So this stage facilitates an ego-self dialogue, which is leading to further emergence of the self and greater balance. Let's summarize our session. We've looked at post and neo-Freudian therapies in particular. We focused on analytical psychology and Carl Jung. We've looked at fundamental concepts, treatment in analytical psychology, strengths and limitations. This ends our session today on analytical psychology. Thank you for listening.